95% of college counseling center directors surveyed recently say the number of students with significant psychological problems is a growing concern. With the help of one such director, we're going to explore the mental health of students on campus today. How are things different from when their parents went to college, if they did? What changes in society are reflected in what brings students in with their problems? Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and our guest today is Danielle Oakley. Dr. Oakley, for the past 4 years, has been director of the University of Wisconsin Counseling and Consultation Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with over 40,000 students at that university. Prior to that, she was the director of the counseling services at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado. She is described by those who hired her as passionate in her commitment to providing the highest quality of mental health care to support student growth and well-being. Danielle, thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dick.
Would you say that's accurate, that the presenting problems are becoming more serious over time?
I would agree with that, and if you look at the data that you just provided, I think directors across the country would say the same thing. It's a great challenge now, not only dealing with the number of students who are coming in for mental health services, which I have to say is a good thing. The challenge is, how do we meet the needs of those students given that the issues that they're presenting with are more severe and need more intensive treatment?
Well, can you give us an idea of what kind of problems students come in with?
We are seeing trending that students are coming in with significant issues about anxiety, depression, relationship concerns, substance use issues, and I think that it is important also to note that at this point in students' lives, when we look at a traditional age college student, this is the first time in their lives that some of them are experiencing their first psychotic episode, their first manic episode. It's also a time of life when eating disorders can also become more severe.
Yeah, you mentioned more coming in, maybe that's good. Do you think more are coming in because people are more comfortable going to get help and therapy, or just because there's more problems?
That's a really good question. I think that what we're seeing in our national college health assessment data is that more students are coming to college already having received mental health treatment.
Oh, really?
So they're coming with having been on medication, with having had counseling, coming in with more of a psychological history. I think it's also important to note that one of the good things that is happening is that people are getting more access to mental health care, which I think poses the dilemma is that students who 15, 20 years ago who would have never been able to go to college because of the mental health issues that they were dealing with, having better access to care and treatment is allowing them the opportunity to pursue this type of an academic goal.
Okay, so in a way it's good they're getting treatment, but in a way it's bringing more serious problems to the campus, or people who have more serious problems. Is there a change in the type of problems than, let's say, the parents of these students might have had if they went to college that they're presented at a counseling center?
Yes, an interesting thing has happened over the past 15 to 20 years in which depression used to be the number one issue that students came in talking about. We certainly see a significant amount of students with depression, but now we're seeing anxiety as the most presenting issue. If you look at almost 2/3 of college students will report stress as a significant factor in their lives. What happens when stress doesn't get addressed or managed in helpful and appropriate ways, I see it turning into more of the anxiety that we are seeing in college students. And the anxiety seems to not be what we typically used to see in terms of a generalized anxiety and worry about things, but it's acute and it takes on this element of panic in which something must be done right away.
What is going on? I mean,
why
are students more, why are they're more stressed? Is that their own internal stuff, or is it societal, or?
You know, Dick, I think that's the $1 million question. I can tell you what some of the conversations are including. We are at a time in our history where this is the first time that children are not predicted to be more successful than their parents. We also see that students are under tremendous pressure with regard to the economy and needing to work while they are in school, and certainly that's always been the case. I put myself through college, but I don't think that I experienced the same element of stress and pressure that is impacting college students right now. We're also seeing...
Can I stop you there for a second, Danielle? So they're seeing more stress. You say people have always worked their way through college. This was true 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
So again, is the difference just that the job market is a little more iffy out there when they finish, or the tuition's higher? Or?
I think it's a combination of things. One poignant piece of information is that students now are, when they are graduating, they're not finding jobs, and so they are going back to school to get graduate degrees, to accumulate more debt, more stress, to graduate without a job.
That makes sense.
And so I think that it's very cyclical. We also are seeing that a third of students are actually moving back in with their families.
After they graduate.
And the goal, yes, after they graduate, and I think the goal typically is to not move back in with families. Right. I think that that's the goal of families. I think that's the goal of students.
Well, yeah, what I'm picturing is, okay, they're coming to college, but they know out there is a scarier world than when you went to college and I went to college. There was a time you got your bachelor's degree, there was a job waiting for you somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. So with that uncertainty, maybe there's this existential angst that exists in their world.
Right, and I think that it's not just unique to college students. I think our world is more anxious. We have more access to information about tragedies that are happening in our world. We see things that are very traumatic, that are disturbing. We are aware of what's happening across the world with regard to social injustices, and I think that it creates a sense of worry about what does the future look like. And when students are in college, it's very future oriented.
Can you give us some idea how busy your counseling center is? You've got 40,000 plus students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Mm-hmm. How many students come in a year?
We see anywhere, it varies, but we see anywhere from about 8.5% of the student population to about 10.
And is that any different than the general population outside of college, that people get 10% of people might get therapy in a year? Are you familiar with that?
You know, I honestly, I don't know that. Yeah. That's a good question. I imagine in the community it could be higher, because we do know that college does provide protective factors. As we talk about this, it's not that there's something wrong with college students. This happens to be we talk a lot about why are college students more stressed. I think that's the focus of the interview. Mm-hmm. But we also know that our college students, being in college, having access to some of the resources and support that they have access to, they're actually healthier than their peers that are in the community that are not in college.
You know that for a fact?
I believe so.
Wow.
I can't quote to you exactly where I know that, but yes.
You've seen so much data across your desk on this. And you attribute that to all the comforts of college, or the support systems in college.
There's quite a few comforts and supports in college. It doesn't make it easy, but it's certainly there's access to people who are there, who are focused on the success of the person, keeping the person in school, helping them graduate, helping them get into the programs and colleges that they want to be in, so that they can eventually get their degree and start the career that they want.
Now, a lot of people, when they picture the University of Wisconsin, maybe in particular, they think of drunk freshmen. Pardon my bluntness, but a lot of drinking going on. What about the issue of drugs and alcohol? How big a challenge is that for you as director?
I think that this is a challenge for directors across the country. We do know, unfortunately, that Wisconsin has one of the highest binge drinking rates in the country, and we are certainly making efforts and strides in that area. We really have to look at the drinking culture. Mm-hmm. We're also seeing an increase in students using marijuana. We've had incidents of growing use of heroin, and so I think it's students across the board, and when I look at substance use, I think there's that cultural piece there, but we also have to consider what is the underlying reason why students are using substances. What is the purpose? Is it just to be partying and having fun? But are they also using the substances to address things like being able to fall asleep so they can get up for classes the next day? Are they using the medications to help them manage their social anxiety? Mm-hmm. So we know that the use of substances can then result in not only the existing mm-hmm. condition, in addition, now there's a substance use issue. Right. And so it's not helpful, but I also think that this is I like working with college students because I think it's a chance different from other populations where we can really change the trajectory of someone's life, given that this is, it's often very developmental. I want to be clear too, I'm talking a lot about traditional age college students. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's changing on our campus and campuses across the country is that there are more people who are going back to school who are not traditional age, who have not done well in the job market or not able to find a job despite the fact that they have many skills. And so that's another piece that we're really looking at is how can we serve the complexity of students. We have increasing diversity on campus. We are seeing more students who are international students from China. And so there's a complexity about having these students come to campus, but being able to offer the resources in a way that meets their needs.
What percentage of your students at this university are from China?
The last numbers I knew about were 10%.
That's a lot. That's
it is.
About 4,000.
Mm-hmm.
And how can the cultural differences, aren't they pretty significant to take people who've been treating American kids and now someone comes in who grew up in China mm-hmm. and is here after their third year here or their first mm-hmm. year here from China? Can you really successfully treat people who have such a different culture they're from?
I think we can. I think we have to slow down and we have to look at the ways that we're attempting to do this. And we have to invite experts who can help us. Right now, we are in the process of hiring a Mandarin-speaking therapist. We have a Mandarin-speaking Chinese scholar here this year who is also helping to provide guidance. And it's not only just about the mental health, we talk a lot about what is happening in the center and what we are doing, but so much of our mission has to be about working in collaboration with the entire campus and the entire community and the parents and everyone who has a stake in the success of college students, to bring them on board so that they can recognize and respond someone who's in distress. But we also have to help everyone with this idea of building resilience in students so that it doesn't get to the point where they need to come to us to seek treatment.
Interesting you bring that up, because I interviewed Hera Morano, who wrote Nation of Wimps. And her contention, it was a pretty important book, it came out a few years ago, that micromanaging parents and a school system, a grammar school and high school that wants nobody to fail. Everyone's a winner. Mm-hmm. And after school, kids don't play and figure out their own play. There's managed play for kids, and their lives are managed. Mm-hmm. And she would say, she contends the problem when they go to college is they have no resilience. They haven't failed and learned how to get up again and how to manage their lives. And so you have 18-year-olds predisposed to kind of falling apart at their first failure. Any thoughts about that?
I've thought about this quite a bit as we look at how do we help students be more resilient. And, I think parents are doing the best job that parents can do. We would have to look at what was happening generationally, that in response now we have parents who are more involved, students' activities are more planned, and everyone is a winner. That's different from the generation that I grew up in. We had first, second, third, and no place. And I think that the intention behind it was very good, to build self-esteem in children. And one of the ways that we need to work on maintaining that self-esteem is helping students and children before they come to college build coping skills so that they are resilient when they do face adversity.
Small question, how do you do that?
Oh gosh. Well, I think I think it takes a full community effort. If we are focused on fixing all of this when students get to college, it's probably never going to happen. But it's how do we have conversations with communities and with grade schools and high schools, and talking about the culture that we have right now.
That seems like an enormous job. At the role of a university to go change all of society so that kids come here healthy?
I think it's the role of a university to be a part of a larger conversation to make that happen.
Yeah.
But it's an enormous task.
That brings up the helicopter parents. Do you find that parents are more involved in wanting to know what's going on in the treatment of their traditional 18-year-old student coming to college? Are parents invasive sometimes more than they used to be?
I think that's a good question. When parents are involved, it's usually because the parents are very concerned. If we go back and look at a comment that I made earlier about how there are more students who are coming to campus who have more significant mental health concerns, if I was a parent of one of these children, I would want to be more involved, and I would want to understand what is happening with my student. I'm talking to them on the phone. I'm 4 hours away. They're not responding to my phone calls. Well, frankly, they're not responding to their texts. And they're not seeing activity on Facebook if they're invited to be on their students' Facebook. And I realize as I'm saying this, those things may not even exist anymore because digital technology changes so quickly. But the parents really are scared, and they're concerned, and they want to know what's happening with their student, and I have a lot of compassion when they call and they're worried.
Wow. You brought up electronics. How do you think computers, Facebook, social media is affecting the whole milieu of being on campus and therefore the mental health of students?
I think that technology is a wonderful thing, and it really can open up so many possibilities with regard to learning and teaching, and I think it really has changed the way that we even think about universities. There are many universities now that are purely online, and you don't go sit in a classroom. So I think it really has afforded many the opportunity to be able to get an education, people who may not have been able to. But when I think about social media and texting and just the way that our society has changed, we're a 24/7 society. I feel a little bit anxious thinking that I can be contacted 24/7 and that people are waiting for me to respond to their texts and emails. And if I wait an hour, do they think that I'm not paying attention, or I'm not available, or I'm not doing my job or being responsive enough? And I think it can create some of that anxiety that we have to be on all the time, and I think it really impacts sleep. So many people sleep with their cell phones.
This is true.
And how can you get a good night's sleep if you're thinking about the cell phone going on?
They sleep with it right next to them?
Yes.
And if it rings, they're up. And if they get a text, they're up?
Yes.
That's kind of crazy. Wow.
Well, a little bit, but I
Wow.
can say I sleep with my cell phone next to my bed. On in case something happens. I have to respond to that. I think I have a different thing. But I think that as I speak with students, they have been brought up as digital natives. That is how they communicate. I think it helps them to feel as though they have more connections, but I'm not sure about the connectedness. When we look at National College Health Association data, 60% of students reported feeling lonely in the last 12 months.
Oh my goodness.
So we have all of these opportunities for connectedness, yet there's a difference from my framework about sending someone a sad-faced emoticon in response to sharing something painful than actually sitting with someone and being in their presence and sharing how sad we are to know that that's what they're experiencing and being able to provide that kind of comfort.
So there's less face-to-face time.
There's less face-to-face time. I was struck about 10 years ago. I was talking with a student who was having roommate difficulties, and they just couldn't quite work things out in their situation. And so I was providing some ideas about how they might have this conversation. At one point I realized that the student and I were having a very different conversations. She was trying to figure out how she was going to get this down in text because she and her roommate were in the same room, sitting on their beds, texting one another.
No. But shocking.
Possibly, yet...
Why would they do that? Why would they in the same room? Why would they text each other? I don't get it.
Because that's how... that is how our society has impacted them. They're digital natives.
Yeah.
They use technology to communicate with one another.
Wow. Well, let me ask a little more. It's a difficult question, I'm sure, for you, and that's got to do with suicide rates at colleges. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned how many foreign students you have. Mm-hmm. Just comes to my mind that they might be lonelier people in a different world and harder to reach, and the suicide rates might be higher among foreign students than among American students.
We currently have a suicide prevention grant right now, and we have identified international students as one of the groups that we have most concerns about. And I think when you talk about the loneliness, there are often there's concern by some of our students from, particularly as we talk about China, concern about being able to speak the English language well. Yes. And the fear about that results in that isolation and more connection with Chinese students, and the tendency there then is to speak Chinese. Yes. And some innovative programs that we have been trying to engage in, across the country, is figuring out how to engage Chinese students in a different way, even having something like a conversation group in English to talk about problems provides an opportunity for that outlet and some social connection as well.
Is the incidence of suicide, if we're not looking at foreign students, but American native students, is that changed over the years, or is it pretty much just always a tragedy, but there's not a big difference in how often this is happening?
The rates are increasing, and it's still always a tragedy.
Any idea why or how much those rates are increasing?
There have been conversations about this idea about resilience and about coping, and we live in a now society. I want an app to fix it. I want something immediately at my fingertips that's going to make this better. And we don't have that for mental health. It's a process. It takes time. And I think that there is less tolerance of feeling that way and wanting it to end. the other piece of it too is we've always had bullying. There have been bullies since the beginning of time. We have more access to people to bully them now. So there's so much cyberbullying that happens.
Even for college students?
For college students. I think there's just more bullying in general. We've seen cases on television where mothers are bullying the friends of the child. So it provides more opportunity for the bullying, and we know that bullying, it increases anxiety and depression and thoughts about suicide and lower self-esteem, and there doesn't really seem to be a way to hide from that.
Wow.
And it's very disturbing. You know, many students who come to campus talk about the experience of having been bullied.
And what about looking at aggressive behavior? Is there any frequency and concerns about people who might hurt others, who might get a gun, the mass murders, whatever?
Well, it's always on everybody's mind. After Virginia Tech and Northern Illinois and other more recent incidents, we're always thinking about that. It's an interesting place to be on campus, in which there is a sense that we are responsible for our campus community. And when there are adverse outcomes, there seems to be this question of what university or college did they attend. They're not going back and looking at what job did they have when they were 18 years old, that somehow there's a higher standard held that the university should be responsible. And I think it results in anxiety on the part of universities, faculty, and staff about what happens and what if we are the next person. It could happen to any of us.
Is there really anything you can do about it? If someone's going to do this, they're going to do it?
Well, there are certainly that, but I think we also can figure out ways many times that the people who do this feel socially disconnected. And how can we help? Again, I will go back to that buzzword. How can we increase resilience? How can we help people feel more connected and as though they belong on the campus?
Is that your job as director, Danielle, or is that the job of the whole University of Wisconsin?
It's the job of the entire university to reach out and connect to students. We have a very specific program, as many universities have, that specifically trains faculty and staff how to have conversations with students that they're concerned about, and teaching them about what the resources are that are available. Over the last, I would say, 10 years, I think university college counseling centers have been really looking at this idea of access and how do we go out on campus, which is a challenge with limited resources. So we have people coming for the service, for mental health treatment, while at the same time, if we can go out on campus and reach students and connect to them, especially those students who wouldn't typically come in for services because of issues around mistrust, it not being culturally appropriate for them to seek out the services of a professional and talk about mental health issues outside of the family context. We need to find ways to meet those students. I think one of the challenges now is looking at it. Not now. Let me restate that. It is even more important now with recent incidents in Ferguson and the recent decision in New York City about not indicting police officers. I think regardless of where you come out on the issue, and should there have been charges or shouldn't there have been charges, it is affecting our students. And so we look at racial aggressions and microaggressions, and we look at those events. They're impacting the emotional, the psychological, the relational coping of these students who are feeling marginalized and without a voice.
Well, that's an awful lot for you with your staff of 30 people or whatever you have to attack versus the whole campus culture, isn't it?
we have to be a part of the conversation with the campus culture to look at things that tie a couple of things together. And I certainly can't say that there's research that does this, but let me take you through my train of thought. Is that we know that racial microaggressions and aggressions impact rates of depression and anxiety and self-esteem, lower self-esteem, and suicidality. So we know those things are there. We also know, and this is very interesting data as counseling centers start having a conversation with the university about how mental health really is tied to learning outcomes, that GPA and college student success are better predicted by depression and anxiety than they are ACT scores, SAT scores, and GPA in high school.
The less the anxiety, the better they do.
The less the anxiety. So the more depressed, the more anxious the person is.
Sure.
If just even thinking about the symptoms of those mental health issues, the capacity for learning when someone is not feeling good about themselves is worrying constantly. They're not getting enough sleep. They may not be eating. They're not interested in activities they used to enjoy. How does that impact their ability to learn and engage in the community?
I see this as your counseling center. You're the beehive, and you're trying to get the university to make sure people who need your services get here through professors, through going out and reaching out, right?
Yes.
That's the model.
Yes. That is the model, but I also think we have to change the model, because if everyone comes here who's having problems, it's going to overwhelm the resources. So that's why we have to have conversations now with the campus community involved, so that we're all in this together, supporting student mental health, which we know is going to help retain students and contribute to our graduation rates.
What keeps you up most at night in your job?
The thing that keeps me up most at night is how are we going to meet the needs, and how do we help the staff keep meeting the needs. These are...
Without burning out?
Without burning out. These are remarkable, committed, and passionate people who are really smart, who want students to succeed. And we're trying to figure out what is the best way to do that. So how do you meet the student need, and how do you do it in a way that at the end of the day it feels really good?
Well, what I'm picturing is you're just kind of overwhelmed with demand.
There's a lot of demand.
Yeah. And finally, for students who might be coming to college at 18, and of course their students are coming at 40 or 50 too, but to the bigger load coming in a traditional way, and to their parents, any counsel you want to give them before they come to this environment that might make their experience better?
I think many students who are coming to college, to get into college is more competitive than it's ever been. And students who come to college typically are the best when they come. And what happens is they get here and they find out so is everybody else. And I think if they knew that, and if we could have more of those community conversations about how to prepare students for that and how to help them bounce back when things happen that are very difficult, because those things are going to happen. There's going to be bad test scores, and there's going to be the end of the first adult relationship, and there is going to be social isolation and some rejection, along with all the wonderful positive things that happen. But to help those students be better prepared, help them focus on how to build a community when they get to campus, how to really build connections and define groups that they can be with so that they have that social support as well.
Danielle Oakley, I thank you very much for filling us in on what's going on in mental health at college campuses. And I hope you'll join us on the next edition of Insights.